You're listening to GWP Live. I'm your host, Isaac Hedges, joined once again by co-host Jacob Fulmer. We are here once again delivering live weather updates on this winter storm that appears to be headed our way. There have been a number of recent developments throughout the day in terms of what things are going to look like naturally as we've gotten closer to it. We know a lot more about it. So, Jake, what can you tell us about how this storm's looking that's headed our way?
Yeah, so certainly a lot of changes. Of course, we've seen the majority of those snowfall totals go up just a little bit because there is greater confidence that it will actually occur. One of the other big changes that we've seen is those winter storm watches that were issued across the state of Missouri. Just about all of those have been upgraded to winter storm warnings. So that's this pink area. So any of these counties across the pink, that's where we have winter storm warnings in effect with the National Weather Service. They're in Springfield expecting a foot of snow for some areas, or up to a foot of snow, we should say, across southern Missouri here. We've also seen ice storm warnings issued across Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Tennessee. This is where we're looking at the possibility of some areas getting anywhere between half an inch of ice to upwards of 2 inches of ice. We could be talking about extended power outages, especially across this purple region. But at least here in Missouri, that's not going to be the biggest concern. The biggest concern is going to be those travel difficulties with the snow, but also the very dangerously cold wind chills that could lead to frostbite in as little as 15 to 30 minutes to the exposed skin. So that is
Absolutely.
our biggest concern.
Yes, so certainly want to bundle up if you go out there, if you have to go out there during this snowstorm, though, as we mentioned, certainly last night here on GWP Live, if you can help it, if you can avoid going out any more than you have to, sort of make those preparations beforehand to get those groceries. Still got a little bit of time to do that before this storm heads our way. But again, time is running out to get prepared for all of that. And I understand the conditions here. This winter storm is going to be somewhat serious. Of course, that is a change from our last edition last night when we did GWP Live, of course. Now, a big part looks like a vast majority of Missouri there you see on the pink your screens for our viewing audience out there is under a winter storm warning. So, Jake, what else do we know about the impacts and how this is going to look in our area?
Yeah, so a couple of things to point out about this. The warning means that it's not only possible, but it's expected. When there was a winter storm watch, that was like, we're not really sure if it's going to happen. We're just saying that it might happen to get people prepared. But when you have a winter storm warning, that's more of a now type of a deal. That's a you need to prepare right now because heavy impacts to travel is expected within 36 hours. These winter storm warnings begin in southwestern Missouri at about 6 p.m. or exactly at 6 p.m. tomorrow, and then they begin at 12 a.m. Saturday morning for central Missouri, including Columbia here. And so that is when these winter storm warnings are going to be in effect. We also, of course, have the winter weather advisories from New Mexico to Missouri, and so you could still have some travel impacts. But when you're under this winter storm warning or an ice storm warning, that means that you should only be traveling unless you absolutely have to. And then, of course, we talked about the cold being another issue. Cold weather advisories across Missouri, Illinois, Kansas, wind chills expected to be 5 to 15, even upwards of 20 degrees below zero. And that's going to occur over several days. The wind chill will likely dip below zero tonight and will stay there all the way through Monday morning. So a long duration event as far as cold and as far as those impacts from the snow. We also know that temperatures are not going to warm up a whole lot next week. And so that is really going to affect how quickly the snow is able to melt as well. And so, of course, all of this, these graphics, these weather alerts, all of that is from the National Weather Service. That's where we're pulling all of these graphics from. And we'll go to a couple of specific offices, the National Weather Service forecast office here in Kansas City, showing us those winter storm warnings across Kansas City, all the way up to St. Joseph, including into Butler. Columbia was added into these winter storm warnings just to the north of just to the north of Columbia, we have those winter weather advisories going into Macon and Randolph counties, and then further to the north as well. And so that's where we have the advisories versus the winter storm warnings. And then there's those extreme cold warnings across northern Missouri. This area could have wind chills at up to 30 below zero, so a little bit chillier than what we're going to experience here across western and central Missouri. We can also look at what the National Weather Service Forecast Office in Springfield is calling for. And of course, all areas are under winter storm warnings. All areas are under winter weather advisories as well. Arkansas is even under that extreme cold warning. And so again, everybody under those winter storm warnings from the National Weather Service office in Springfield, and that does include Joplin and Nevada across our local area that we forecast for.
Absolutely, and a bit more severe, of course, at least certainly from what we know or from what we knew at the time, for what we initially covered last night. Of course, we talked about things certainly dipping down into single digits, though, Jake, you say that now a pretty good indication, a prediction that certainly as soon as tonight we can expect things dipping below zero. So some pretty solidly sub-zero temperatures headed our way. Again, there's very cold temperatures here. No joke. Again, of course, as you mentioned just a bit ago, another important distinction to make in terms of forecasting is that between a warning and a watch. Naturally, a watch is less severe. In the case of a warning, it's something that's actually expected. Of course, certainly know more about than I do, but that is an important distinction to make, and it's easy to get those mixed up. They do sound somewhat familiar, but again, and that is in the case of all sorts of weather events, tornadoes, and different storms like that. Jake?
Yeah, certainly so. A couple of interesting points that you made there. And again, you said that it is going to be starting tonight, kind of reinforcing that this is coming in tonight. It's called a blue northern cold front, and it's the most powerful type of cold front that we can actually even see. And that's what's coming in tonight. And so if you do have any pets outdoors, I would make sure to bring them in before you go to bed tonight, and also make sure that the faucets are dripping. I would say no later than 11 p.m. is when I would start dripping those faucets, because that's when the temperature is going to dip below 20 degrees. And I would keep your faucets dripping all the way through Tuesday morning, because that's how long we're going to be locked into the cold. Now, we've been comparing several different models, and at this point, there's really two different scenarios as to what could happen. And so we're going to look at a couple of different scenarios, and that's going to affect how much snow we get out of the system. We're going to show you some amounts in a little bit, but it's either going to be lower than what it says or maybe a little bit higher or somewhere in the middle. And so this right here is the European model. This, of course, is graphics and data that we're pulling from tropicaltidbits.com. That's where you can find this. That's the website here that we are using, pulling from these global models here, including the European model. And this is the latest run that we have, or yes, we do have a newer run. Okay, so we do have a newer version of this European run. So we'll go ahead and we'll give you that one. But here's one scenario. The snow moves in Friday night, kind of like we're expecting to, light to moderate. It would take a while for it to reach the ground. So it might show snow on the radar, but might not necessarily be hitting the surface. And so that's the important thing to understand, is if that does happen, that's to be expected, and that has been factored into the snowfall forecast. So that's the first important thing to realize about this. The other thing is that we will likely see a lull in the action in the middle of the day on Saturday. It is very well possible that sometime mid-morning or early afternoon, the snow may even stop. And you might be wondering, well, that wasn't really much of anything. It kind of ended really quickly. But the worst of it is going to be a second wave that's going to come in. It's the same storm system. I've heard some people claiming that we're getting two winter storms in the same weekend. It's actually the same storm. There's just two different waves within the same storm system. So that's an important distinction. And the second wave is likely going to have the heaviest of the snowfall rates. If there is a break, in the European model, you'll notice is not showing a break in the snowfall. The European model does not expect the snowfall to stop until Sunday midday. If that scenario were to occur, our snowfall totals would be a little bit on the higher end. There's another scenario, the GFS model, which is showing that we would have one wave that would come in Friday night into Saturday. Then it's right here, again around 6 p.m. on Saturday, that the snow would stop. And then it would restart Saturday night with that last band of snow moving in. And so that's really the two different scenarios. We're either going to have two bands of snow that's going to move through, or it's going to snow throughout the entire event. And depending on that, that's going to depend on what our totals are.
Absolutely. So certainly that'll play a role in the totals in terms of how much snowfall we see. Jake, as you mentioned, of course, important to note on that front. Of course, the possibility, bit of a lull on Saturday. Now, again, not two different storms. Important distinction to make there. Not two different snowstorms, but just a bit of a break in the same one. It'll come back and it'll be more severe a bit later in the case that that happens. You also noted some different precautions that different people out there, the folks at home, can do in order to sort of minimize any potential damages here resulting from snowstorm, these very cold conditions. Of course, you can drip your faucets, great thing to do there. As we previously mentioned, you can also open up those cabinet doors under your sinks, keep those pipes from freezing. That'll help a bit. Again, it's going to be sub-zero temperatures a lot of this, so even consider bringing any outdoor pets in for the night. Again, would be worth considering. Jake?
Yes, and then there's a couple more things that we're going to look at. Next, we're going to look at snowfall forecast as far as amounts, since we've already looked at the timing and kind of the overall forecast of it all. And then we're going to look at temperatures and explain how that's going to be an issue, not necessarily just this weekend, but also into next week. So we're going to start here with, as far as snowfall totals, this is called the National Blended Model, is what this is. It's the NBM 1D viewers, what we're looking at here. And so all data and graphics that we show on this website are from NOAA / the National Weather Service, NBM 1D viewer. This content has not been endorsed by NOAA or the National Weather Service. So just throwing that out there. So this is also free to use. You can find this for any airport location. So if you type in the four letters for like the first four letters of like the airport across any airport across the US, then it will show you this. And so that's basically what this is. Also, this is an experimental project. So just keep that in mind as well. It's not necessarily the most accurate thing, but the intention is that it blends all of the computer models together into one forecast. That's supposed to be kind of the idea behind it. And this is for Joplin. This is at the Joplin Regional Airport, and this is showing about 9 inches right here. But what I think is very fascinating is it shows a 72-hour snowfall forecast probability. And so it shows that there's a 96% chance of at least 4 inches of accumulation. And then it says 81% for a half a foot, and then 54% for 8 inches or more. And there's even a 16% chance, according to this model, that we could be looking at over a foot of snow, with the most likely range being between 6 and 11 inches. And so that's one forecast. This has been a little bit on the higher side, but this is showing that on the more extreme end of things, we could be looking at over a foot in Joplin, or on the lesser things, or on the lesser side of things, if it were to come in two smaller waves, then we would likely only have a little bit of accumulation. And then the same thing can be done if we were to look at Columbia. There's not really too much of a difference, about 7.5 inches, so just slightly a little bit less, and also still a quarter or 25% chance of getting a foot or greater here in Columbia. So there's a little bit more variability because Columbia is more on the edge of that system. All of that being said, here is what I am forecasting. I've put together just basically all of the information, all of the data that's out there that exists. If you blend it all together, if you go based on historic averages, there's all sorts of other information as well that goes into that. And this is what it comes down to, in my opinion: 7 to 10 inches for Nevada, 5 to 8 for Columbia. And then Joplin, probably around 7 to 10 as well, maybe a little bit higher. So that's if you put everything together, in my opinion, that's what I've been able to find.
Absolutely. So, some great information there in terms of the anticipated snowfall levels for a couple of areas. Of course, they're certainly in our local community, Nevada, Missouri, and naturally some of the anticipated snowfall levels there. Some of the levels there in Columbia, Missouri. Now, naturally, something we failed to mention here, we didn't hit on your area specifically, your city. Have any questions about that, how the storm's going to impact you? Well, you can always reach out and ask us. We'll answer you, provide that information to the best of our ability. Though, Jake, as I talked with you just a bit ago, as we're getting much closer to this storm, that is, there's less speculation to be had on it. We've got more solid predictions on it now that we've gotten closer to it. So we won't be here as long, actually, for the next couple of days. And certainly beginning today, not so long as we have been here on GWP Live in the past couple of days. So again, now more than ever, time is ticking. If you do have those questions, we're still happy to answer them, but you'll have to reach out and share those with us before long. Again, you can always put them in the live chat here. If you're watching the playback afterwards, you can put them in the comments below the video. We'll get back to you on that. But in terms of if you'd like to hear a response now, the very best thing that you can do is give us a call here live on the air at 417-448-0819. Again, that number is 417-448-0819. You want to be prepared for these winter storms coming your way. So any details that might be a bit blurry on that, anything you might not be sure about what to do, different precautions you ought to take, how it's going to be in your city, give us a call and ask us. Jake?
Yes, and we're going to be here for about 3 more minutes on the live stream. So you got 3 more minutes to call in that number. And because we only have about 3 minutes left, I'm going to speed this along just a little bit. One final fact is that, or not necessarily a fact, but just something that I found interesting is Nevada averages about the amount of snow that we could get out of this one storm system. And so I just found that to be very fascinating. But we haven't really had any snow, so I guess we kind of need to make up for it out of this one storm system. And so here's that map that we looked at yesterday. This was updated as of, it says 6 o'clock, but we could say 7 o'clock. It hasn't really changed in the last hour. But this is my snowfall forecast from Friday night through Sunday. This is a GWP created graphic, as you could probably tell by the fact that it doesn't look that fancy. But this is just something that I threw together in about 10 minutes. But it kind of shows you the general idea that south of Interstate 70, including Columbia, anywhere points south, 5 to 8 inches is expected here. This would include Jefferson City, Lake of the Ozarks as well. So that would be in that 5 to 8 inch range. Harrisonville, Butler. As you go to Kansas City, a little bit less, most likely in the 3 to 5 range. Then you get here into more southern Missouri, into the Ozarks. We start getting into that 7 to 10 inch range. Again, I really think this is what we could see. You know, I was keeping these amounts pretty low yesterday just to be a little bit on the conservative side, but now that we're getting a little bit closer, we have greater confidence in this. And so, again, 7 to 10 inches is possible for Joplin, Nevada. And then as you go into far southwestern Missouri, that's where I think we could see over 10 inches of accumulation. This is still a preliminary forecast. Tomorrow night, we'll either do it in our weekly recap or we'll do it in another live stream. Whichever one we decide to do tomorrow, we will show a final forecast that will have all of these numbers updated. And the last thing I want to say before we cut out here on the live stream is, again, very below average temperatures. We've talked about that, but what we haven't really looked at is the fact that this snow is going to stay on the ground for a very long time. I am not anticipating it getting above freezing for the rest of the month after today. And so that's the important thing here, is that we could be talking about temperatures staying below freezing for several days, if not even a couple of weeks, which means any snow that does fall over this weekend is going to stay on the ground. There's even the possibility that we could get another system late next week. Too early to say for certain, but something that we need to certainly keep our eyes out for. And again, later tonight, that front is going to move in. That's going to bring in temperatures, single digits, teens. We could even be dipping below zero by the time we get into Monday. But then again, on Tuesday, we may get a brief relief from the colder temperatures. We may even get above freezing in southern Missouri at least, but everywhere else it's going to stay below freezing again. We could dip back into the single digits by the end of next week. And so that 6 to 10 day outlook from NOAA is showing temperatures likely below average across the central and eastern part of the country, with a moderate to high risk of hazardous temperatures between January 30th and February 1st, which is next Friday through next Sunday. So late next week into the weekend, we could have dangerously cold temperatures, most likely not as cold as what we're going to experience this weekend with the snowstorm, but it certainly could get very close to that. But I think that is all the time that we have for tonight.
Absolutely, I suppose it is. And we thank you all for tuning in here to GWP Live. If you had those questions, didn't get a chance to ask them, you can always submit them after the fact in the comments down below this video. You can call that same number we've mentioned throughout. Certainly, check that out in the playback, any of that information that you might have missed out on. But I do believe that concludes things for tonight. So until next time,
I'm Jacob Fulmer.
I'm Isaac Hedges, host of GWP Live. From all of us at GWP Live and Great World Productions, good night and God bless.